It's the Rangers Journal Night.
Hello and welcome to the Rangers Journal News Show at lunchtime on Friday. I think it's Friday the 13th, actually. Bob, welcome aboard today, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Bit of a croaky throat today, so I'll do my best to keep going today, Billy.
If it makes you feel any better, you just sound the same as normal, mate, so don't worry too much about it.
No
But I know what it's like when you're feeling something, especially in your throat, and you're on a talking podcast, you maybe worried about it. But no, I was just trying to reassure you, you sound good, mate. But you're okay today, is that right?
Yes, doing well today.
Good stuff. It's going to be a little bit of a break for the last couple of weeks, mate, because we don't really have to talk about takeovers or new managers. All this is kind of in the past now. So all we've got to do is look forward to a summer of, hopefully, a summer of spending. Is that what you're looking forward to as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of, as you say, a refreshing break. We've had quite a lot to discuss over the last couple of weeks, and I think, especially in the chat anyway, I think we're looking forward to seeing hopefully some signings come in the door from Monday. I think there's still been some confusion regarding these transfer windows that have been, there was one last week that closed at the start of this week, and obviously the main transfer window opens from Monday till the 1st of September. So yeah, looking forward to seeing a few new faces in the door.
To be honest, mate, I think it was you in the chat that caused a bit of confusion by saying it was open, but I don't know. Did we ever get a resolution to that? Was there a transfer window open for us, or was it always just these teams in the World Cup club thing?
I think it was just the Club World Cup. I mean, obviously, I can see that most of those clubs seem to be making signings, so I think it was really just more so for them. But I guess if we had signings, that it should have went through. But yeah, bit of confusion. But hopefully now we're all sorted. It's just one long transfer window between Monday and the start of September.
Well, I guess, I mean, transfers can happen really they can sign the contract at any time. We just can't register them. So hopefully there's been things going on in the background. Now, one thing I was kind of worried about with Neil Scoppin leaving was there was already one player with PSG, youth player, has now signed for someone else. There was probably deals getting worked on by him and his team that now are going to be either ripped up or, having a double check over by the new owners. Was there any rumours you heard of other players that Coppin had been looking at?
No, I think just from what we've discussed, Billy, I think, the ones that have been mentioned in the chat, obviously Josh Mulligan seems to be highly, thought of. Again, that seemed to have been getting worked on potentially by Coppin. That seems to be, likely to go through next week once the transfer window opens again. We've got nothing confirmed from the club officially yet, but there certainly seems to be a bit of smoke behind that one, and the same for the Israeli boy Turgaman. Again, I know that's one that's been previously linked with us, but yeah, again, just hopeful that we start to see some fresh faces coming in, and it will be interesting to see if Russell Martin gets the players that we expect him to need to play the style of football that he's played at his previous clubs.
That's the first one on my agenda today was the Mulligan one. Rumours that he had a medical yesterday, unconfirmed, as you say, by the club. Are you, I'm not saying surprised at the link to him, but was he someone that you had you've been watching the last couple of years at Dundee?
No, I think he's been solid enough, Billy. I think even again, just in games against us, I don't think he ever showed up as a weak link in the Dundee team. Probably the same as Lyle Cameron. I think they've shown themselves up to be really quite good players against both sides of the Old Firm, and obviously more so Cameron because we know that he is coming in really shone towards the end of last season, which again has kind of filled some fans. Myself included, to see what he's going to be like when he struts his stuff at Ibrox Park. So yeah, I think it comes back to what we've discussed in previous pods, Billy. Trying to sign young Scottish players that are hungry, energetic, looking to make that breakthrough into the next level of their development or next stage of their careers to be at a big club, whether that's either side of the Old Firm before potentially an onward step. So the fact that he's coming in hopefully coming in, he's able to play a couple of positions, which again hopefully suits the manager's style of play. Is he a direct replacement for Tav? Who knows? Is he seen as more of a centre back? Is he a CDM? Again, it'll be interesting to see if that deal does go through, where he fits into the squad. But yeah, I certainly think looking at the best of Scottish talent is something that we've lacked in previous years. So I'm hopeful that's an avenue that we're going to try and exploit more in the coming weeks.
The main one that obviously jumps to mind is Lewis Ferguson, who obviously had success this season with a cup win. Having hearing Barry on the radio once or twice mention how he would have walked on broken glass to sign for Rangers. It is frustrating when we let, especially players that want to come to us, let them go abroad and I guess show what they could have done with us with even a higher level league that is such as the Italian league. I guess that's a frustration for you. You're nodding along when I'm mentioning them.
Yeah, exactly, Billy. I think it's certainly ones that you look at and go dead cert shouldn't be. Again, no brainer. You hear a lot of that. You hear a lot of that in some of these deals. It's a no brainer to sign for either side of the old firm, but obviously more so for Rangers in our case. And the fact that he always showed up well in Aberdeen teams against us. I remember the goal he scored in the semi-final of the League Cup. He always was able to handle himself in those types of games, and the fact that whether it's snobbery or whatever you want to call it, just allowed us to let him go. Obviously, it's come back to bite us because obviously he's now been linked with a Premiership move or another club in Italy, whether it's Juventus or whoever, another higher tier team in Italy. With no disrespect to Bologna at all, but the fact that he's now getting looked at in the tens of millions of pounds bracket, you're going, well, we could have picked him up for 2, 3, 4 million, maybe. Maybe no more than that. And we could be getting that benefit now potentially if he'd had a good couple of years. But yeah, it's certainly one that irks Billy. I know it's probably not the first, it won't be the last that slipped through our fingers, but I'd like to think that with the new structure in place at the club, that we're certainly going to take a more invested look into the talent that Scotland's got to offer at the other teams.
It's I maybe disagree with you on the 3-4 million, mate. I think Aberdeen would have had the Rangers tax on, and we'd be looking at least 5. But I mean, looking at what he's worth now, and I know what's the point in talking about it, and we'll move on. But looking at what he's worth now, we could have doubled or even got more than that if he'd been a success for us. And I was going to talk about outgoings first, but there's been a couple of questions on Connor Cody and a question there by AJ why are Leicester so keen on getting rid of Cody. I don't know if that's the case, but is he a player you would welcome coming in this summer?
I think so. I think I can understand the links. Billy, again, he had a loan at Everton at the time Thelwell was in as sporting director there. So again, I can understand why there's maybe a relationship there, or a link that we maybe look to utilise. I mean, I think he's 31, 32, so he's certainly not young. He's certainly not old by any matter of means, but it is a problem position for us. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about the proposed outgoing of a certain Dutch defender, but I think for me, Cody, I think he's always done well. I quite liked him when he was at Wolves. He was a captain at Wolves. Again, I think Thelwell was there when he was at Wolves as well. So, a reliable head, maybe in the Davy Weir mould, maybe not as old in age terms as Davy Weir, but could certainly bring us a bit more composure, a bit more physicality at the back than what we've got at the moment. Obviously John Souttar aside.
I think as a type of player, though, we should be looking at someone, with a bit of experience, certainly playing at a high level, where he's been maybe looking in his cabinet and not seeing any medals or any trophies there. Could he come to us and get fulfill that kind of desire that I'm sure players have got to win some things in their career? And he's at an age where it's maybe a place we're going to need to refill that kind of gap, because the players like Tav is getting on beyond that. We need some experience to kind of be there for the next couple of years, and he's one. And I say not necessarily him personally, but he's the kind of mould of player I'd like to bring in, certainly in that centre half position, as where you can kind of get away with the older player, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, I know there's been some discussion about John Souttar and the fact that, a lot of fans see him as a siege defender. He is certainly more robust than he was when he first came in. I do think hopefully the majority of his injuries are behind him. I just don't think, if we're going to be playing 60 games a season, is he the person that you're going to hang your hat on to be there? Wait, potentially Wednesday, Saturday, or Thursday, Sunday. It's you don't want to put that pressure on just one centre half. You want to have that rotation as well, and I think the likes of Connor Cody would bring that. Again, from memory, he's never really had any major long-term injuries. I'm sure folk in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the likes of him, I know that we were linked with one of the defenders at Ipswich. I think it's Cameron Burgess, again, relatively young player. I think early to mid 20s. So again, the likes of that and Cody being physical, kind of no nonsense defenders, we certainly need to fill that position up. I think that's really for me, it's probably the most important area that we need to get right in, this transfer window, Billy. In the forward areas, I think we're okay. Yes, I know that we still need improvement, but we both know titles are built on solid defences, and if we don't have one, it's going to be an extremely difficult year.
Yeah. The one thing, before we kind of move on to talking about some of our players, the one thing about this transfer window and transfers in general, since these the new owners have been there, is we're not getting a lot. Not getting a lot of hooks or anything to kind of get into, which is probably good. Long term is probably good, but certainly if you're running a podcast, it's frustrating for us to not have stronger links, or even that people do reach out to us and you give you things here and there. Not that it's necessarily always 100% true, but it's nice to get wee rumours here and there. But there's very little on the go at the moment as regards incoming.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's maybe just the way that the new ownership sees themselves. They're going to be very private. I don't think there's going to be a lot leaked from the club, which again has been a problem in the past, Billy, that we've been given far too much information at times from the club that doesn't bode well. So yeah, it might be a good thing that we don't see a lot of this, or see a lot of rumours until things are in place and the guy, they've been signed or the deals have been done. And I certainly think it's not only a frustration for us, but for a lot of the fan media that it's really drip fed, or it's coming from the player side or the agent side or the second team involved in any potential transfer side. Which again is a good thing from us, because we're obviously keeping our ship tight. So it's just, again, for us as a podcast, that we're looking for anything that we can report back to the majority of fans.
Let's talk about the rumours regarding their plans. I guess the strongest one I've heard this week was Cyril Dessers being linked with a move to AEK Athens, which what struck me in these rumours was that given the Euro tag, you feel that has been a finished on its own, the thing that we should be looking together.
I kind of caught some of that, Billy. I think some of your audio is a wee bit distorted for me. I'm not sure about the folks watching, if it's coming through that great, but I think I caught most of it about Cyril Dessers going to Greece. I think it's certainly an interesting one. I've been kind of thinking about this one this morning before coming on, and I know he's much maligned. I know he said he misses far more chances than what he scores, but when it comes down to the fact he scored 50 goals for us in over 2 seasons, or in 2 seasons for us, you can't really shy away from that fact. And I would be quite concerned to see where we may have ended up if we hadn't had those goals in the team. despite the number of opportunities that he's had. And yes, everyone thinks he should be more clinical, but he certainly scored what I would maybe term vital goals. I'm sure some people would disagree in the chat, but he's done well for us over the last 2 years. I think sometimes looking at it, it's maybe it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. If he has more quality around him, does he score more? Possibly. Does Russell Martin see him as his number one striker? That'll be very interesting to see going forward if the transfer doesn't come to pass. But if he were to leave in the summer, I'd certainly be, I'd feel a slight tinge of sadness just because he comes across as a nice guy in interviews. He's done well for us. Yes, he could have scored more goals, but again, you could say that for any striker in any team. But if we can get the money in, it would obviously help us rebuild maybe across more positions in the team than just up front. Again, I know we touched very briefly on Turgum and the fact that it looked as if there was maybe a 4 million bid put in over the weekend which was rejected. So you never know if Dessers goes. Does that money then, is that reinvested in the boy from Israel? That it could be that kind of win-in, win-out system. So yeah, we certainly need to maximise our outgoings to help us fund the rebuild that we certainly have in place for the summer.
Let me know if my microphone sounds any better now.
Yeah, far better.
Okay. My apologies, folks. My screen just kind of flashed and the lights all went on and off, so I don't know what it is. But please just jump in, Bob, if it happens again, and I'll stop talking. The thing I was saying at the end of my comment was the rumoured 10 million euros. Do you think that sounds a bit too far-fetched?
Well, it was interesting. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Doug in the chat. I think it was it worked out at like 8.5 million, and you're going, well, for a striker that scored 50 goals in 2 seasons, it's not out with the realms of possibility. The fact we paid 5 or 6 for him to if we could get a profit on him, then I would certainly give him a good handshake and say see you later. I think every Rangers fan would see that if we were able to make a profit on him, considering his age as well, Billy. It's if that is the rumoured figure, even if we broke even and got the 6 million, 5 or 6 million back that we paid for him, it certainly makes sense to do from a financial sense anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we made any profit on him, there was I'm sure it was on Twitter, it could have been on follow, I can't remember, but there was a picture of a dartboard, and it was a dart on the bullseye and about 50 other darts all off the board, and it was like Cyril Desser's Rangers career, and that's the thing, he misses an awful lot of chances, which is why the fans are frustrated with him. And I think if you had someone with who was a bit more clinical, I mean, there's no arguing with the 50 goals, I'm not, but the amount of chances he's had for those 50 goals has maybe been 250, something like that. He misses an awful lot, and I think if we could get a more clinical striker, it would be even better. And we're always looking to be better than what we are. So yeah, Cyril Dessers is one of the strongest links to be away, and I think that's probably the more likely of the outcomes that he goes, Bob, rather than he stays. The next one, rumoured to have a lot of interest in, and I'm not really surprised, and that's with Nicholas Raskin. He's done well for his national team. He's done well for us the last 6 months. But one thing I do keep in mind with him when people say we need to build a team around him is that it's only been 6 months. And is this a purple patch for him? And should we cash in now?
I think, I mean, he's been a really good player, and I think we have to caution that with saying that he's been here for 2 years and he's only had a good 6 months out of those 2 years, Billy. I think again, through the various podcasts that we've had on over the last couple of weeks, it's been discussed. But for me, it comes down to that player training model that we keep going back to, that we keep saying hasn't been implemented as well as it should have been, and we have to maybe start looking at these players more as assets than the sentimentality that comes with being good for our club. If a bid were to come in of 15, 20, 25 million. I know that there's been a variety of numbers put out there by various outlets. That for me, again, sentimentality aside, business sense, looking at the new owners and new structure, you can't ignore that figure to go. He's going to have he has had a good 6 months. He's broken into the Belgian team. He's obviously ousted certain other Belgian midfielders from that first team. The Belgian managers come out and really backed him and really shown his support for him. In the team, especially in the last international break when he came on, I think at the start of the week, and the fact that they managed to go in and win the game against Wales, it seemed to kind of bring a certain calmness to the midfield, which again we've obviously had the pleasure of seeing over the last 6 months. But yeah, I think my heart says yes, I'd like him to stay and build a team around him and have him here for 3 or 4 years and then potentially sell him on with a profit in mind. But I'm also very conscious of the fact that we need a lot of players in over this summer. I know we probably won't get everybody that we need or want, Billy, but certainly if we were able to sell him for the rumoured 20 million, just as a ballpark figure, that allows you to go and spend that on 3 or 4 quality players to replace him. I know that we've been linked to a few of Russell Martin's ex players from other teams that obviously won't be cheap. So yeah, from a business sense, he's done well, but we also need the money. It'd be good to have the money to reinvest in the playing squad.
The one thing that's come up in the comments is the signing an extension. I think that would be he would need to do that if he was going to stay, because running down his contract is something we've done an awful lot with players recently, and it's not something that we can continue to do. And to be fair, it's been brought up, by the owners and even by the previous manager that there was a problem with this kind of running down the contract thing. He's been linked to Leeds. Now, I don't know if that's just a lazy rumour with the 49ers connection. It's probably the level of team I think he would achieve. I think Aston Villa as well been linked with him. He quite famously said that he'd love to play for Chelsea. I think he's probably not quite there. You don't really leave Rangers and go to Chelsea or go to one of the teams that are pushing for Champions League spots in England. Is Leeds United the level of team you see him going to in England?
Probably, and again, that's no disrespect to Leeds. I mean, you could look at it from even any of the promoted teams that have come up. Burnley or Sunderland as well. I know that Sunderland will be looking for another midfielder after they sold the other Bellingham brother to Borussia Dortmund through the week. So they've certainly got cash to play with. Yeah, I mean, the lower half of the Premier League is probably your initial step, Billy. Probably for anyone coming from either side of the Old Firm to then try and make that breakthrough to go, well, if I perform well for this team, keep them up, I then have the opportunity to try and maybe go to one of the top 10 teams. Even the likes of Brentford. I mean, if he went to somewhere, I know Brent, you might look at Brentford and go, it doesn't sound like an attractive name, but I mean, they're top 10, top half of the Premier League consistently over the last few seasons. That's where they're ex-manager now has went to Spurs. So for me, it's a logical step in his career from a development point of view to aim for that kind of maybe lower half to middle of the table Premier League team, to then have an opportunity to move on to one of the top tier sides in the Premier League.
Just you mentioned Brentford. I was driving by the stadium, or driving over it really, as you do. Have you ever been past the stadium?
No, I've not actually.
It's right in the middle of London. You're just driving over like an overpass, like through the middle of Glasgow, and then you look down as a stadium, really just below you. It's an interesting place to play, that's for sure. Yeah, I think he possibly could be the one that would make us the most money. I don't know if you disagree with that, but you've mentioned that 20 million plus. It's obviously, I think Bassey's one of our record signing. He was, I think it's 19 and a half. It's mentioned in the comments there. I'd be looking for that amount for him with his potential as well, and the moving up to the Belgian national team. And I know they're not quite the same as maybe the national team of 10 years ago, but they're still a good team, and he's broken into that, and he's become a kind of not undroppable, because I know he didn't start the game the other day against Wales, but he's the one that the manager went to kind of pull them out of the hole. So is that the kind of figure you've only mentioned it, but I don't think I necessarily disagree with the upwards of 20 million for him.
Yeah, I think again, just as we've discussed there, Billy, and what the chat has said as well, the comments in the chat, that looking at the team and the club from a business model point of view, the players that are coming into the last year or 18 months of their contract either need to sign an extension, or we look to sell them to try and make some money back or make some profit. I know we've got another couple of names that we'll come on to shortly, but again, from the point of view of Raskin, if he's getting into the last year of his contract, you certainly don't want to let him have another 6 months and get to January, and then he goes, well, I've already been offered a pre-contract by such and such, and you're then having to let him go for nothing, and you're going, well, we could have got, similar to what we'd said in the past about Morelos and Kent, and those players that left for nothing, having spent quite a lot of money on them, obviously in the case of Kent. We certainly don't want to keep going down that road, and I know it's not going to be an easy fix. It's not going to be something that we can address overnight, but we need to start taking steps to protect ourselves and our assets, as well as look to, again, the whole sustainability comment from the new ownership is that'll go to help us become more sustainable by investing more on the park and selling players at the height, at their peak. For us, they might not be at their peak in their own career, but as part of the Rangers career, if the worry is he comes back after a really good summer, and well, worst case scenario, he picks up an injury and he's out for 6 months, and you're going, well,
Yeah.
You've lost the opportunity to sell him at his peak. You then have to let him build himself back up. Does he come back the same player? We've went round that merry-go-round so many times in the past, Billy. It's the fear. It's that fear of the unknown. We could sell him now when we know that he's fit. He's at his peak. He's doing very well both domestically. He showed up well in Europe for us. He's obviously, as you said, broken into the national team.
Scoring goals.
Yeah, scoring goals, setting up assists. He's having an influence both for us and for Belgium. And again, business hat on, you go. You have to sail with it. Strike with it at the iron's hot. As much as it pains me to say it, at the same time, because I think we all have that. We're probably of that era where players did stay for 4, 5, 6 years and became mainstays of the team, and built up a legacy and a legendary status at the club. But it's certainly not. Modern football isn't like that anymore. As sad as it is to say, and that's what I think part of the discussion was, and part of the comments were from both Patrick Stewart and from the new ownership, to say we have to modernise the football club. Yes, it's great having these great players, but we also have to keep in mind that they are assets, and we need to be able to maintain financial viability with bringing these players in and out of the team.
One player that did seem to be definitely away, but I'm seeing some rumours on Twitter this morning that things are kind of up in the air, and that's Robin Propper going back to FC20. I've never actually seen so much angry comments about a player leaving, arguing over the transfer fee. I think.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed to be. It was. I thought we signed it for 1.5 million, but because I thought there was some buyout clause. But then I'm reading other comments that we paid 4.5 or 4 for him, and we're only going to get 1.5 back, and I know we're going to get 2.5. I don't know if we'll ever. A lot of these deals nowadays are non-disclosed fees, so I just think he's not worked out here. If he can get a pathway back to his previous club, and they're happy to take him, I think we look for someone who's suited to this league more than he was.
Yeah, I think, again, coming in last year, it was a kind of swap deal for him and Lammers to a certain degree, that, Lammers went to 20 to just because we needed him off the wage bill, because he just didn't have a pathway under Clement, and we thought, well, we're getting a an experienced Eredivisie defender. Again, the red flag of he's only ever played in Holland all his career. He's never played out with that. So again, technically a very good defender, isn't suited to the physicality of British football, of Scottish football. Again, if he does go, he's going to have the goal against Celtic in New Year, ghosting in at the back stick and sticking it away, which is always going to be a fond memory for us. But again, just as we touched on, Billy, we need to. There's going to be a massive transition this summer of players. The majority of fans know, having seen the dismissal of Clement, and that these players effectively did down tools. We've seen the ability of the players that we have in our squad, because we've seen it under Barry and what Barry can try and get out of them, and it just didn't. Despite all of Barry's presence and influence as a Rangers man, as everyone puts it, it didn't motivate these players to perform better. And again, that's just a quality thing. That's a mentality thing of modern football. They maybe just don't get it as much. So yeah, on the case of Pröpper, it's just not worked out. He's not. Again, second season. If he were to come back into the team, he would certainly have a better idea of how to play against these teams. But the concern then is he then targeted because they know he's physically weak and isn't maybe as comfortable. I also think maybe getting played out of position didn't help him either. If he's not really a left-sided centre back, and having to take up that position with John Souttar, who then was kind of moved, because we all said it 2 seasons ago when John Souttar played left centre back, he didn't look great because he's not comfortable on that side of the park. And again, this is the conundrum of having a left-sided centre half and a right-sided centre half. Would he look more comfortable? Would he look more assured because he's on his favoured side? Who knows? He's maybe just not had enough opportunities at in a back four, in a back three, playing in that position. So yeah, I think that's possibly went against him as well, Billy.
I was really disappointed in him, because when he did sign, the things we're hearing about him is he liked to get in the ref's face. He was the one that wound other opposition players up. He was the kind of main man, hard man of the team to a degree, and we've just not seen that side of him at all. I don't think I've ever seen him speak to the referee, and I've certainly not seen him going for, hard crushing tackles. He just seemed to be rabbit in the headlights with this league.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, Billy. I think from my experience watching him, he does like to have have a chat with players. Maybe not so much the referee, probably because he wasn't, he was captain at 20, so maybe that was more, why he spoke to the referees more. But I certainly think he liked to wind opposition players up. I did see that on a few occasions at Ibrox when he was playing. But yeah, I just don't think physically he's got the attributes to be our number one centre half. Especially with Souttar, and I think this is again one of the issues that we need to kind of address over the summer, is we're going to need a left-sided centre half. Whether that is in the form of the returning Ben Davies, or if it's a new signing, or whoever. To me, it just doesn't look suited, and yeah, I think it would be best for all parties if he went back to Holland, because again, he's familiar with that league. He knows what it takes to play in that league. There's not as much pressure on him at 20 as there is or has been at Rangers, and kind of just what we've talked about. We need to find players that are going to enjoy the pressure and the expectation that playing for Rangers brings. And again, just one of a number of players that we have at the moment that just don't seem to have that, eagerness to impress, if that's the right term.
You mentioned Ben Davies. I also bring up Kieran Dowell. It's kind of went quiet with them. They obviously left when the loan period ended down south, and should technically be returning to us. I was hopeful though that there was some things in place for them to stay on down there and on a permanent basis, or at least be picked up by another championship level club. So it's a bit disappointing that nothing's really come out. I know obviously the transfer window's not open yet, but I was expecting to be more links with them. Are you surprised?
Yeah, slightly, Billy. I think from what I've seen on socials, and I think from our group chats as well, that I think it may have been a case that Birmingham are looking to firm up their interest after the loan spell, and we're waiting for the new manager announcement and the new takeover to be confirmed. I certainly think Ben Davies was a mainstay in that Birmingham team for the majority of the season. I think from what I've seen, Kieran Dowell did well. I think he had 5 goals, 5 assists, I think, from like 20 odd appearances. So again, the fact he seemed to play well, again, maybe the pressure was off, despite being in a title race for League One. Again, pressure expectation was maybe different at Birmingham than it is for us, Billy, and that's allowed them to flourish. I certainly don't think they're bad players by any stretch of the imagination. I just think we have had some very poor luck in injuries and performances for these for these two players. We could talk about anybody in the squad, to be honest, Billy, but Kieran Dowell is a good player. He might just not be a good player for us. Same with Ben Davies. Ben Davies is a good player. You don't sign for Liverpool and be a bad player necessarily. But for the most part, I think Ben Davies, again, solid defender. Just maybe it doesn't have the attributes. It's very similar to Proper. Just maybe doesn't have the attributes to compete in Scottish football. Maybe not so much British football, but pressured expectation. That can play a massive part in the mentality of players, which obviously bleeds onto the park, which again we've just been witness to some very poor performances off of what in general could be very decent players.
Yeah, and I think these new owners do like to go down the money ball side of things when it comes to attributes and stats and stuff like that. So we'll see if they bring in a couple of centre halves at least that are built more for this type of league that we play in. The last kind of major rumours this week was regarding Hamza Igaman being linked with away. And I'd taken some notes of clubs that had some interest in him. Quite a few: Everton, West Ham, Brentford, Lens, Lille, Rennes and Strasbourg. So quite a few teams in for him. For me, if I'll put this out first, I would like him to stay and be our main striker next season, and really kind of step up and build on the season he's had this season. I mean, he scored against them, he's goals in Europe, but he's obviously attracting attention. We obviously didn't pay a lot of money for him, so this could also be a case of striking while the iron's hot. I just feel that maybe the iron's sitting halfway temperature just now, and we could get even more for him next season when he really has a good season. Yeah,
no, I agree, Billy. I think just as a comparison, if you looked at it and said, if Igaman, having only really played 6 months for us since January, December, January time, if he was to come in next season, I think he scored 16 to 20 goals for us overall in the last 6 months. If he came and scored Desser's numbers of goals, if he left, if he come to this time next year and he scored near enough 50 goals for us in a year and a half, you're certainly looking at it going, you've got no issue if somebody comes in and wants to pay 25-30 million for him. Again, I would hope it would be more, considering he would have had an extremely good season for us, which would then hopefully result in silverware, at least domestically, whether that's the cups and the title or the title. Again, it's being part of a successful team will always add zeros to the transfer value, and I don't disagree. I think if he were to come in and be our main striker next year and got a goal every 2 games, you're certainly talking a lot of interest come next summer if we can hold on to him till then. Granted, if he stays fit, and fits into Russell Martin's style of play, it could certainly be a very positive year ahead for Eagleman. I certainly wouldn't want to let him go just now. I get the point of the interest, but I certainly think he's got more in his locker to give us and develop into. I think as we've kind of touched on with Dessers is at that kind of point in his career where the likelihood is he maybe has one last big payday, if you want to call it that, which this could be with the Athens link. Hamza, you've certainly got one or two more levels that he could probably reach in his career. He's still extremely young in terms of football career, and I think he can only get better. So yeah, I think if he comes in next year as our main striker, he'll have far more options next year and far better teams. With no disrespect to the teams mentioned, Billy, but it could certainly, we were talking about Raskin going to Chelsea. I mean, if Eagleman scores 30 goals for us next year, there's a possibility that he could reach that level of Chelsea. Maybe not straight away, but he could certainly be on the verges of if he has an extremely positive season for us.
Let me bring this comment up because I wasn't on last week, Bob, but Buffalo Albert saying we were calling him Iggy. Who was calling Eagleman Iggy?
No idea. If it wasn't me, it would have been other Billy. But if it certainly wouldn't have been me. I don't think. I quite like.
No,
using
I'm pretty
Hamza,
sure that I'm pretty sure Scotty would ban us if we'd if one of us said Iggy on the pod. So that slipped under my radar. Anyway, no, we did try to use the real names, but yeah, I agree with. We're probably just agreeing with each other, Bob. I think we'd like to see him for another season. But the age, and I've brought it up before, he's not that young, 24. Which I know is that, I'd love to be 24 again. I'm not complaining about that, but it's not the way we kind of think of him. I think is maybe as a 19-year-old breaking through, but he's not. He's 24. He's only really had one full proper season, and that's with us. So I know, and we're not in any rush to sell him. We've got him on a long contract, but I guess 24, 25 as he would be next season's no major difference. But I feel that these big clubs want to take risks on players when they're slightly younger than that. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think again.
I'm just being told he's 22. Sorry, so I may be wrong there. That's my fault.
But even so, Billy, even at the age of 22, there's a lot of players down south that are on multi-millionaire contracts at 22. I mean, this boy's come in and had 6 months for us again. That have kind of shown us enough to be excited to see where he goes in the next year, in the next 18 months. It could really, step up. Again, if he fits in at Russell Martin's style of plays and we're successful, there's certainly no ceiling to where he could go. It's again. I'll come back to what I've said in previous pods. The fact he's not an academy player, he's not been conditioned into playing a specific way for European football. He has that rawness about him that we have seen, both positive and negative, over the last 6 months. And I think giving him a good footballing education over the next year to 18 months can only improve him as a player, and also as a consequence of that, improve the financial benefit for us and the likelihood that we sell him down the line. So yeah, it's certainly I see a good prospect. If he's only 22, you've got another 15, 16 years at the top, maybe. Potentially 20 if you look at if you keep yourself in trim like a certain Cristiano, at 40. But yeah, I mean, he could potentially have another 20 years at the top if he continues on his current trajectory. Well,
my apologies for suggesting he was 24. I don't know where I picked that up from then. But yeah, thank you for correcting me in the chat, everyone. That's kind of the links I had this week, Bob. I don't know if there's anybody else that you'd seen links to incoming or outgoings. But that's really the kind of the main ones that I'd seen.
No, I think there was nothing really on top of what we've discussed so far, Billy, in terms of transfers. I think there'll be more. To me, there will be certainly interest around the players returning from loan, and how they potentially have a part to play in the season ahead, whether or not they just get put back out on loan again, or they're moved on elsewhere. I know that one of the comments was mentioned Matondo. I think, just to touch him in for a minute, the fact he went to a second division German team, scored a wonder goal in his debut, but then I think struggled for game time after that, kind of goes to show that he's likely to be a player that is potentially moved on in the fans' eyes. I mean, I know we're desperate for wingers and width and speed, Billy, but I don't know if he's going to fit in to Russell Martin's style of play. I mean, he could be a player. He could be a real player if he, knuckles down and shows a bit of graft. But at this stage, having been at the club for 3 years, I certainly don't see it happening. It's certainly a long shot.
No, it's kind of worrying that we paid so much for him, and he's not shown any signs of being able to make us at least half of that money back. And I'm assuming he'll be on a decent weekly wage as well. So he is one of the kind of worrisome ones. Someone like Dessers doesn't worry me that if he stays or not. Obviously, he could get as a decent transfer fee. I think looking at the players we have discussed today, you're looking at upwards of 40-50 million pounds if all of them had to be sold. So a good amount of transfer kitty could be available, and we're probably in a decent place, obviously, with the new owners coming in as well. And they've obviously mentioned the figure of 20 million. We're yet to see if that's just the initial amount, or they're prepared to go a bit more than that. But the worry for me is how close these qualifiers are. I know it's maybe you see the date and you think, oh, it's still a few weeks away, but we've not had any time on the training pitch with these players, and no new players have come in yet, and we're still looking to get rid of some. So it's still not worrying times. It's exciting times. But are you expecting to see a flurry of signings over this next week when the transfer window opens, Bob?
I'd hope for, I know Russell Martin mentioned maybe one or two. I'd like to see 2 or 3. I know that we've got Lyle Cameron coming in. Of that we're already sure. If we can get Mulligan signed off, that's 2 for definite. If we could get maybe 1 or 2 others, again, just in the run up to the Champions League qualifiers, Billy, I think the players return back on the 27th, 26th, something like that. I think it's a couple of weeks anyway, until they come back, and then it's another week until the Champions League qualifiers. So yeah, I certainly think, again, just as we touched on, looking at it at the bare, if Proper is confirmed as going, then you're really looking at John Souttar and potentially Leon King as your centre half pairing, which doesn't leave a lot to be desired in the run up to this Champions League qualifier. So we certainly need at least one other centre half in to before that game. I think it's going to be a long window. Obviously myself and Cammy have had we did the last year's weekly updates. Along with yourself, it was a very long summer transfer window last year, and it will be again this year. I think if we can get 2 or 3 players in before the Champions League qualifiers, it will hopefully set us up to be successful and get into the group stages. I certainly wouldn't want to rely on Champions League qualification to allow us to be able to spend money. I don't think that will be the case with the new ownership in place, and obviously we've got this EGM on the 23rd of June regarding the 20 million investment. So yeah, I think I think it'll be quiet for a long period. I'm hoping for a flurry at the start, a flurry at the end, and maybe drips and drabs in between. I think for me that wouldn't be too bad. That would kind of fixate your transfer addiction until the 1st of September. I think if we were to sign 12 players next week, I'd be slightly overwhelmed, but happy, but overwhelmed.
I'm more wondering what pod you and Cammy did between you that I wasn't on. But yeah, thanks for clarifying that I was on them as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do remember last summer being a bit of a drag and a bit of a disappointment when the window closed. So yeah, I'm hoping for a much more exciting window this season. I'm hoping for a little bit of a flurry, as you say at the beginning, and then a player a week, because I think we're going to need upwards of 13, 14 players, Bob.
Yeah, no, I agree, Billy. I think it's certainly. I know that it was touched on that Russell Martin's first day was Tuesday this week in the job. I'm sure him and Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy have already been hard at work identifying targets to go and start negotiations with. I know that was mentioned in the chat there as well about Harry Darling, who's been at more or less every other club that Russell Martin's been at, big centre half. I know it was touched on in one of the pods during the week, in the last couple of weeks. So can certainly go back and look at them in depth. But he's a kind of imposing centre half that we should be looking at and trying to identify. And if we could get somebody like him in, it would certainly be a good statement of intent to say that we're looking to address our problem areas first before what you could term luxury players. Going forward, we're not lacking in resource, Billy. I think as we touched on, centre halves and defence is certainly the area of most focus and most priority in my eyes that Martin and the sporting team have to address quickly.
No, I agree with you, Bob. But yeah, thank you very much for being on with me today. So unless there's anything else you wanted to bring up, I'll say thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for the comments. We've had a lot today. Sorry if I didn't get to all of them, but I tried to bring up the kind of poignant ones on the screen. And also thanks to our sponsor, Off to the Match I Go. So if you go to offtothematchigo.co.uk, anything you want to get over there, 10% off by using the code JOHNNO10. So if I can encourage people to go over and do that, that's Off to the Match I Go. So thank you everyone for watching. We've got loads of shows again coming up during the week. So we'll see you then. Thank you.